I spent most of my childhood away from my native Vietnam. I can tell you many an experience of having to navigate a foreign environment and not always being understood. Now, my experience growing up as a third culture kid was in no way traumatizing, but it does help me understand how language can be used to justify exclusion and allow certain groups to say, those who don't speak our language and don't follow our customs are less intelligent, less civilized. When that happens, language, rather than being a bridge to understanding, becomes a weapon against both human and non-human others.
I grew up in rural Illinois where there was still a black and a white side of town. And unfortunately, like many places, we had our fair share of racist people. At the root of their prejudice, I feel like they were scared that anyone not exactly like them, perhaps a woman or a Muslim, a Mexican, a person with disabilities, or a member of a different species, would take something away from them or make it seem like their position is less important.
When I first got involved in animal rights activism 3 years ago, it was at first with little support from my parents. Once in an argument with my mom, I referred to the trillions of non-human animals exploited and killed every year as victims. My choice of word really upset my mom. In her mind, victims meant only human victims. And in fact, the Vietnamese word for victim itself, nạn nhân, is made up of two Sino-Vietnamese characters, one of which means person, and that is always understood to be human.
A bigoted or racist person uses arbitrary differences between people, like skin color or gender, to divide them, rather than using our similarities to unite them. Just like a species believes that one species is more deserving of love or life than another, when in reality, every living, feeling being has an innate desire to live free from harm. Some humans think that they are so different from other animals. They don't even consider them to be individuals, but rather inanimate objects. But they are individuals, just like you or me. They have likes and dislikes, thoughts and emotions, languages, even cultures. Many form bonds, especially mothers and babies. Take Dolly and her calf, Dolly II. Dolly was an old, clever cow who, unlike most cows in the dairy industry, lived on a small farm that allowed her to raise her babies. Most farms tear the mother's calves away from them so they can steal the milk that those calves would need to grow. Dolly had raised many calves by the time Dolly II came along, and she knew when her daughter needed to be independent and had to go and look after herself. Sometime later, Dolly II had her own calf at the bottom of a faraway hill. Tragically, her calf was stillborn, and she suffered from a displaced womb. Now, a veterinarian was able to stitch up her womb, but in the coming weeks, it was clear that she was weak and depressed. Then Dolly II disappeared. Workers searched all over for her and eventually found her about 3 fields away with her mother, Dolly, who was licking her all over. Now, at this point, they hadn't been together in ages, but in a time of crisis, a mother was taking care of her daughter. And about after 6 days, Dolly II had made a full recovery. Cows are far from the only animals who forge deep relationships. Orangutans, orcas, wolf spiders, and many other animals are devoted parents. Prairie voles, a type of rodent, are one of the animals who stay together and pick a mate for life. During stressful times, they give the equivalent of hugs and kisses. Pigeons are remarkably faithful. One pigeon named Harold remained by his mate's Maud's side, even when she was sick and unable to fly, risking his own well-being to look after her. Speciesists have learned to exploit specific traits of various species. They take advantage of dogs' protective nature, forcing them to live outside and guard their homes, often denying them basic needs like food, water, shelter, or affection. It's the ability of rats and mice to learn quickly that makes them so popular in laboratories. Humans exploit animals for what they can do and then discriminate against them for what they can't. It's the same thing that we do to each other. We capitalize on what we want, and then we demonize or disregard things that are unuseful to us or which is unfamiliar. We objectify women's bodies and then shame or punish them for their choices. We celebrate black musicians and athletes, and then allow our justice system to fail black people in general. We celebrate cuisine and holidays from other cultures while mocking the people that created them. We disregard people with disabilities, forgetting that we too could become disabled at any moment.
Since the beginning of time, we humans have deliberately distanced ourselves from everything that connects us to the rest of animal kind, while classes of humans thought to be inferior have been likened to animals. In ancient China, the great philosopher Confucius taught that people who weren't Han Chinese were closer to animals in their greediness and aggression. Throughout history, this same type of degrading language has been used by everyone from the most enlightened moral teachers to the perpetrators of the most gruesome human atrocities. In Nazi Germany, anti-Semitic propaganda frequently compared Jews to lice or rats who carried disease. And clearly we haven't learned. Even now, in Vietnamese slang, criminals and so-called lowlives are often called dogs, who are supposedly our best friends. When you think about it, the language that we use to talk about other animals is incredibly dismissive and condescending. We refer to most animals as it, the same pronoun we would use to refer to a table. Usually, only companion animals are he's and she's, and even then, only the ones whom we've gotten to know well, like Mr. Fluffy McFluffsters, the beloved family dog. I could go on and on about the less than dignified names that some animals are given. Some groups of animals, like fishes, aren't even seen as individuals, but one big uncountable mass. The same word fish is used whether you're talking about 1, 2, or 100 individuals. And we call ourselves owners of even the dogs and cats whom we pamper and consider family members. That's not all. We project a lot of qualities that we dislike about ourselves onto other animals. Growing up, I used to be reprimanded for leaving my room like a pigsty. We use fat as a pig and dumb as a mule as insults. The equivalents exist in Vietnamese and many other languages. A lot of these stereotypes are the same across cultures. We use a lot of euphemisms too to maintain a dividing line between ourselves and other animals. We all have flesh, skin, and hair, but the exact same body parts that we kill other animals for have been renamed meat, leather, and fur instead.
Some humans have taken exploitation even further, using one form of violence to support or justify another. White supremacists use cow's milk as a symbol of their alleged superiority. They share photos of themselves chugging milk and using milk emojis to celebrate their whiteness. Now, people of color are often lactose intolerant, so these racists somehow feel that digesting another species' breast milk makes them a part of the master race.
I'll let you in on a little secret. Humans are animals. Well, so it's not really a secret, but when we're talking about animals, we're not imagining ourselves being in that category. And human intelligence and emotions continue to be the measuring stick for how we understand other animals. Groundbreaking studies would show that pigs are as smart as a human toddler. This is something that I used to repeat a lot, but now I realize that even as I would try to show that other animals are just like us, that phrase "like us" reinforces the idea that they'll always be inferior. So the bigger problem with all this is that these everyday words and usages often go unexamined, because from the moment we were born, we learned that we humans can do with other animals whatever we please, just because they belong to a species different from our own. That's what speciesism is, and it's every bit as unjust as racism, sexism, or any other ism.
So why draw a line between humans and other animals? Why not take a stand against all needless violence, all discrimination, all injustices? There's plenty of compassion to go around. We can't put animal rights on the back burner just because racism and other forms of harmful discrimination against humans are on the front burner. Not just because the vast majority of hate that animal advocates like myself receive are from self-identified racists or sexist, homophobes, sport hunters and grinning trophy hunters, or because exploitation of others is all one thing. Animal rights proponents embrace the words of civil rights activist and feminist Audre Lorde, who said there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. But there's still another reason. We know so much about animal intelligence and about the cruelties hidden in slaughterhouses, the puppy mills, and the circuses, and all other places animals are being used. Once you know that, it's hard to brush that aside. Bullying and violence don't stop at the human door any more than they stop at the race or gender door.
If we're to challenge this false sense of entitlement, if we're to recognize other animals as the unique individuals they are, with unique personalities and interests, and rich, complex inner lives, we have to stop treating them as objects and passive caricatures in the very words that we speak. If we didn't look down upon and talk down to other animals so much, we wouldn't feel so insulted or dehumanized when we're compared to them, or when we're reminded that we're not separate from them. So as you remove other animals from the equation when it comes to what you eat, wear, or use in other ways, I hope you'll also stop to ponder the impact of the words you're using and the portraits you're painting of other animals.
Henry Berg, founder of the ASPCA, won the first court case that saved a child from abuse. And when he was criticized for teaching kindness to animals, it's said that he responded that if you teach a child not to step on a caterpillar, you do as much for that child as you did the caterpillar. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was criticized for objecting to the Vietnam War, rather than just restricting his activism to only racial discrimination, he responded that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I agree with Dr. King, and as a black man, I don't really have a choice on how I feel about social inequality. It's not that I enjoy fighting it, it's just that I often recognize that the cards are stacked against me, and I would rather not stay quiet about it. I came across these words by the late great Maya Angelou and turned them into a personal mantra. I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. And I've relied heavily on this quote for my own personal development. It's helped me choose where to spend my money and how to treat other human beings. And yes, this quote has a lot to do with why I'm vegan. Once I understood that, like humans, chickens, cows, pigs, and all other animals experience pain, experience fear, and value their own lives, I banned products made from exploiting them from my life. I knew better, so for animals I did better. Knowing that people can change, even dramatically, I'm determined to open as many eyes as possible. Living as a black vegan is a practice in Sankofa. This is a traditional West African term that means we can learn from our roots in order to help us move forward. If we really want to honor our ancestral brothers and sisters, we must strive to be our healthiest, greatest, most compassionate selves.
Let's all be a little more careful with what we express and how we express it, because our words, as well as our actions, can have very real victims.
Those of us working to break down prejudice against animals are the same ones who are advocating for human rights and challenging hate groups. Because we know that oppression in all of its ugly forms is wrong. The women's rights advocate, Connie Solomon, said, "It's hard to talk about rights if your mouth is full of the bones of a small tortured bird." Let's be strong in knowledge that it doesn't matter who the victim is, and that when we witness oppression, we should not let it go unchallenged, both for the victim's sake and for the sake of our own integrity and consistency. Thank you.
Thank you.